Good thing. Yeah, we've got a few topics tonight. We'll see how we go. First of all, good to see everybody. Let's say hello, see who's in the comments here. And while I do that, let me quickly adjust some of the browser settings, try to save some video streaming space. I hope that the comments are reflecting. I can't see them there yet at the moment, but I see someone making a boom icon. Hey everyone, at least it looks like, there we go, it is working. I haven't changed the comment format from last week. I haven't had a chance to play around with it, but yeah, I still quite like this. At least you can fit in the comments. Look at it in high resolution, you can see the names. So yeah, who we got in here? Definitely going to be talking about the Typhoon tonight. We've got the Rugby World Cup starting soon. We have everybody's names now have to be backwards, and why I think that's a silly idea. A couple of other things that actually came to mind. Remind me if I forget to bring up a conversation about appropriation that I thought about tonight, and various other things. In fact, also about Jordan Peterson. I think I mentioned this week that I clicked on one of his videos, and I found my YouTube. Obviously, YouTube finds his videos to be very sticky, so all of a sudden my recommendations were filled up with videos of his, and I had to go and edit my view history to get rid of it. But I thought that was interesting, so I'm going to talk about that. We've got all sorts of topics, but yeah, let's get in and see who is here. So first of all, we've got Sergeant Bilko, good to see you. Andrew Moboy, thank you always for joining. I know it's late at night where you are indeed in Australia. Believe in yourself, good to see you. Good evening. We've got Davo Hunter, good to see you, Davo. Believe in yourself again. We've got Mr. Cordy Chap, good to see you. What the hell is wrong with Tarento? Actually, did I say Taranto instead of Tarento? Tarento, it's Tarento, yeah, not Tarento, but anyway. Sergeant Bilko, Davo Hunter, we've got Inside Sport Japan. Hey, good to see you actually, because I do follow your Twitter account. I appreciate what Inside Sport does. They follow less well-known sports in Japan, and I think that's pretty cool, so good to see you. Quint Rankin, good to see you as always. Tokyo 503, good evening. Deluge indeed hitting Tokyo in the next few hours. Doesn't seem to be raining right now. It's supposed to be starting, at least in terms of the strong wind period. I'm really going to hit Japan at about 3 a.m. Oh, sorry, Japan, Tokyo. That's the problem with being from a big city, is that yes, you upset everybody by equating your city to the whole country, which it is definitely not. But certainly we are getting a direct hit of Tokyo number 15. It's kind of funny, everyone uses the names of typhoons in other countries and they don't use them in Japan, they just number them, which I actually think is a better system for reasons I will also go into soon. But going back into the comments, we've got Phoenix 787, good to see you sir, welcome. We've got Marco 19914, hi from Estonia, would like to hear about typhoons. Is it very bad right now? It's not very bad, but I've done some extra preparations tonight, which I'll talk about soon. Joseph Lazo, good to see you. We've got some new names, which is always good to see. Welcome, Joseph. And remember, everybody, if you would like me to talk about a particular topic and you'd like to get my attention, you can just add Mark Kiko Simon in your comment. It will flash up like orange to me. It'll stand out, and then I will drop everything and respond if you'd like me to talk about something or answer a question. So you get to be part of the show. Either talking amongst yourselves in the comments or with me. That's a good part about the show. I've got a few topics tonight, I'd say. Whenever I think I don't have many, it ends up being really packed in, but we'll see how we go. We might have some spare time, but yes, been a lot going on. And indeed, Sergeant Bilko, they mentioned it by name on NHK, but I don't know what you're talking about there, so because I don't have all the other context. So yes, indeed. Hey, Andrea's off to Europe for in a couple of weeks, so that is pretty cool. Oh, and I should also remember right now, if anybody watching this is in Seattle, I will be in Seattle next Sunday, which means I'll be flying actually at the time of the show next week, and my time zones will be totally out. I'll be landing at about this time probably. I think I leave in the morning and I arrive in what's in the morning in Seattle and the night time in Japan, and then I've got to stay up the whole day, so it's basically like an all-night rave, except it'll be during the day on a Sunday. Which I've done before, but yes, it's always a little bit rough when I get over there. Andrew Moboy mentioning the fires there in Queensland. I did see the news about that. which is unusual actually, because Queensland doesn't get very dry like Victoria. Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, you do get those bushfires, but yeah, you don't get them very much in Queensland. So I was surprised to see that. I'm not surprised to hear that there are arson, although much of that is a shame and a disappointment to hear. So yeah, a few things that have happened this week, just outside of the topics. First thing is day after tomorrow, I'm quite looking forward to. I'm going to be meeting the Samoan rugby team, and just for the occasion, I found this online. I went and bought a Samoan rugby jersey. I actually really like it. It's got the Samoan sort of tattoo type pattern designs, which are super cool. In terms of Samoa, I was actually born in a town called Papakura, South Auckland, which is kind of one of the places in New Zealand where there's a lot of Samoans when they come into New Zealand. That's one of the communities that's quite strong with that. But yeah, my school, there are a lot of Samoans. Auckland's a very big city for Pacific Island people. And partly because of that, partly because I'm an Auckland rugby fan, and there are so many people from Samoa. Basically, it's often that really, really great Samoan players who grow up in New Zealand, and they have a chance at the All Blacks. They play for the All Blacks, and there's always a bunch of Samoan people who play in the All Blacks. But for those who are either born and raised and stay in Samoa, play in other countries, or who kind of are not in the top rank for the All Blacks, but they're just short. They'll often get to play international rugby by choosing Samoa. So in a sense, as a New Zealander, Samoa's a little bit, feels to me like sort of like a second New Zealand team in a way. There's so many familiar players there that are really, really awesome. Which is to say, pretty much, I would say now I support Japan as my New Zealand first, Japan second, and probably now Samoa third. It's always been Samoa second for me. Like they're just awesome. The way that the Samoans play rugby is really, really awesome. So I've never actually bought a Samoan jersey before, but I'm very, very happy to have that. Hey Perk, good to see you. I'm very, very happy to have this, just because it's like I've played rugby myself for about 10 years in Japan, and I've played with and against Samoans, and rugby is just made for Samoa. Someone who loves rugby, and actually the Samoan people are just really cool to me. They're just very straight up. They're very just into what they're doing. They're happy, and it's hard to explain. When Samoans play rugby, they're physical and they're happy, and they're most happy when they're being most physical. And they're all religious. They're not dirty or unethical. They're just super physical. And I can remember the closest I've ever come to scoring a try in a rugby match. I always played second row, a position that you don't get many opportunities to score. But I remember once I got the ball, I was playing against Yokohama City and Country Club, YCAC. And I got the ball, and I'm 5 meters. I had like 5 big steps to the try line, and as far as I could see in my peripheral vision, there was no one there. So I wasn't even diving over. I was just running straight. And all I remember is it felt like I got hit by a bus. I got hit side on, and when I woke up, there was this big smiling face over me. And I was like, wow, that was an awesome tackle. Completely knocked the ball out. That was like the closest I ever came to scoring a try when I played rugby, and I got smashed by a Samoan guy. And I was like, man, that was awesome. I mean, it didn't even hurt. It's like when you get hit across your whole body at the same time. It's like getting hit by a gust of wind or something. Like you just get lifted up off your feet. It was literally, like by the literal meaning of the word, it was awesome. So, yeah. Phoenix 787 asked, do American Samoans compete for America? Well, American Samoans are American, so of course they compete for America. And to be clear, Manu Samoa is Western Samoa. It's the independent part, which was, interestingly enough, that was a German colony until the end of World War II, when New Zealand took over trusteeship over it. Did some bad things when we did that as well, because it was basically a German colony until that point. But it became kind of a de facto colony of New Zealand, or is administered by New Zealand. Samoans get free immigration into New Zealand. So American Samoa is an American territory. Those are American citizens. They are in the US military and so on. So yes, Tome Samurai, invisible see-through samurai. No, the tsunami hasn't ripped my roof off yet. It hasn't really started yet, actually. It was supposed to start at 9 p.m, but at least where I am, and I'm in central Tokyo, I'm not hearing it yet. You probably start to hear the wind before anything else, so we'll see. Oh, she's in Tyson's new account name. Well, that's good to have you there. But yeah. So as you know, so of course, America. In fact, there are Samoans from all over the world. You know, from American Samoa and Western Samoa. You get a lot of people who try out for the NFL, and they don't get into the NFL from American Samoa, and then the Samoan rugby team in Manu Samoa comes knocking on the door and says, would you still like to play international rugby instead? And I know that they've been trying to recruit American football players to play for Western Samoa, to play rugby. That's one thing, but of course you do get a lot of Western Samoans as well. They go off and try for the NFL, they go off to America, they go off to Europe, they become great professional players. So to me, it's actually like these people are like awesome to me. So I'm going to go and I'm going to take a marker pen, I'm going to get as many autographs as I can on this. It's going to be super awesome. And that reminds me though, the World Cup starts this week. We've got everyone flying in. A few practice games. Japan played against South Africa day before yesterday on Friday night. That's a significant game. It looks like a lot of the top tier 1 countries like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, England, France, they've all been playing kind of tier 2, sort of next ranked countries like Japan, Samoa, Tonga in practice games, and it's good for both countries in a way. They both get a proper run out, they get to warm up a little bit, check their form and everything. The problem is then they're not going to actually play their, they're not going to show their whole hand in a way that they could get studied before they play in the World Cup. So in a sense it's a bit of a training run for both teams, and of course it's arguably, for the stronger teams. They can experiment a lot, they can check their bench and whatnot. For the tier 2 teams, it's a chance to check that they're ready to play tier 1 countries with the physicality. Of course, with Japan, the answer was, although Japan played the most amazing rugby game in world history, there have been some really big World Cup games. It's kind of funny when people talk about historic games, it usually involves the expected country losing to an unexpected country, and that's normally New Zealand losing games. So I'm used to for example, I used to play rugby with a French club, and we'd always watch them. Which one was it? The 2005 the 1999 Rugby World Cup semi-final. I believe it was when New Zealand lost to France. That gets played a lot. The 1995 Rugby World Cup final, where we lost to South Africa, got made into the movie Invictus. But thank heavens for Japan, yes, because in the last Rugby World Cup, when they beat the number 1, number 2 ranked country in the world, South Africa, with an amazing last-minute try. I mean, it was a perfect movie sort of a game, and it's getting made into a movie starring Django Fett, starring Temuera Morrison from Once Were Warriors or Shortland Street, if you're from New Zealand or Australia. One of New Zealand's sort of best actors. Also, of course, in the Star Wars trilogy, the prequels, as Django Fett, the clone father of Boba Fett. He's going to be playing Eddie Jones, the Japan coach, and it's going to be awesome. But anyway, there was a practice match where they got to do a replay of that famous match where Japan beat the Springboks. Of course, it didn't happen like the movie this time. Japan got smashed, and they picked up some injuries right before the World Cup, which kind of sucks. Australia kind of they played Samoa the other day, and Samoa in the second half, Australia tried a few of its sort of second-ranked players, its bench players, to see how they'd go, and they didn't go well. Samoa actually beat them in Australia in the second half. But again, Australia's not going to be showing its full hand in these games. New Zealand played Tonga, by the way, as well, similarly ranked. So Tonga, Samoa, Japan are all about the same rank. New Zealand played Tonga on Saturday, and just for an indication of what New Zealand is planning to go do in the World Cup. New Zealand played until the third quarter of the game, and they decided in the final quarter they would just take a player off and play a man short. They wanted to practice playing as if there was a situation that they had an injury or someone being sent off the field, and to practice how they would cover with one less defender. So they actually just took a man off the field, and they still won 92 points to 7, 14 tries. And Samoans, Tongans, like Samoans, are enormous, and they're very physical, and that's a really bad result for Tonga. But yes, Andrea, I'm sorry, but it's the World Cup, so you gotta let me talk about the World Cup. And I do love, I have a lot of respect for Samoan people and Samoan culture. I'm very excited to have their jersey beside me right now, and to go be meeting the Samoan rugby team at a welcome reception on Tuesday. So I am looking forward to that. No more talk about rugby. Well, you're going to hear more about it in the next few weeks. But anyway, Rugby World Cup, super excited. Andrea Mulway gets set for tall poppy syndrome, Aussie tall poppy syndrome. Yeah, Aussies have tall poppy syndrome. New Zealanders actually have it much, much worse. The thing about Australia that I like about Australia is that Australia is still a culture where people fundamentally, like movies about Australia and whatnot, are still fundamentally Aussies celebrate weird people or strange people, and they celebrate larrikins who make fun of people and so on. And New Zealand, you just make fun of, literally. In fact, it's not, and you don't even make fun. You pull down and destroy anyone who stands out or is successful in any way. Australia kind of has it too, but you've got no idea what New Zealand's like by comparison. It's a tough country in that way. But yes, Andrea Mulway mentioning, by the way, that Bianca Andreescu beat Serena in the US Open final, then apologized for winning. You would not have. Yeah. I don't know. I'm still not well. Yes, I'm not a tennis fan, and I only watch it when there's some reason for me to be interested. There was when Naomi Osaka played Serena last year, and I wasn't impressed by Serena at all. Good on Bianca, of course, for winning, and I think we'll move on from sports. Canada, indeed, Bob Berlitz, boy, good to see you. Welcome to the show. So, into the topics. Got some other topics, actually, which I haven't listed in here. But I'm going to get into this, what I have here first. So first thing is, as I've mentioned before, the big problem with arriving at Tokyo International Airport in Narita is that the name is a lie. It's like, literally, it's literally like putting the airport for New York and Ohio and calling it New York Airport is literally what Narita is. Yes, it sucks. And not only does it suck, but it's old-fashioned and it takes a long time. Like, again, I've said this before. The way I evaluate airports is not by how much shopping or, how much. Singapore is great. There are places that you genuinely don't mind spending time, and they're good for being hub airports. But the great thing about Haneda is that, particularly if you're carrying just a carry-on, which is what I always try to do when I'm traveling for business, you can get in and out of the airport. You can get from the airplane to the taxi stand, and you can get from the taxi stand to the airplane there, like easily within like 30 minutes. I guess you've got to show up early before the flight to be able to do it, but certainly getting off the plane, easily you get out of the airport there in like less than 20 minutes. And to me, that's just like, you don't even notice that you're in the airport. That's the best kind of airport, if you ask me. They're basically building out the capacity of Haneda Airport to increase the capacity by 70%. If you ever have the choice of which airport to choose when you come to Japan, choose Haneda, because, as I've said before, it's too far away and it's old-fashioned and it sucks. And Haneda is awesome. It's not a place I'd want to spend the day, but it's a good enough airport, and you can just get out of it really, really fast. I found this one really interesting. The HSBC Bank, the world famous sort of, they've got kind of commercial and regular banking, but it's basically, investment banking and rich people banking. They did a survey of expats around the world on surveys of which countries are best to be expats. This triggered a bit of a debate on Twitter as to what being an expat actually is. I guess people get the free ads on this as well, but I don't know, that's nothing to do with me. Scroll onwards. This is from Rocket News 24, Solar News according to the URL at the top, but of course Rocket News. It's funny, Switzerland came out number 1, so I guess they're not purely looking at third world countries that treat white people like royalty, but I think that the other choices after that were, Singapore, Thailand, places like that. And I must admit, I kind of scoffed at this. I'm trying to see where the results were for the top countries. First was Switzerland, second was Singapore, third was Canada, Spain was fourth. Which was the highest ranking non-English country. And then again, ahead of Japan were also Vietnam, UAE, other sort of countries. I kind of scoffed at this right away because I do have an association with, first of all, there is a difference between just a regular foreigner or foreign resident and an expat. The definition of expat that I use, Perk, you've kind of got it. For me, an expat is somebody who is, in the course of their employment, being sent overseas to live, i.e., not locally hired, not locally living. They're temporarily in another place for the purpose as part of their job. So, from that perspective, the typical expat package is that you'll be living there. One, you have to be a senior enough employee for it to justify it normally. It's possible for junior employees to be sent by a company. In fact, Japanese companies do this a lot, and they would be expats as well, I suppose. But typically, companies that will pay for somebody to go and live in Japan for a couple of years or in Singapore for a couple of years, they'll be quite senior, they'll get full housing. They will also laughably get hardship allowances. And it does make sense if you think about this from an expat's perspective, that these are not people who choose the place that they are going to. They could be getting sent to Western China, they could be getting sent to Kazakhstan, and wherever they're going to be away from their families. This isn't a place that they're choosing to migrate to. They're being forced by their work to live in a place that they're not intending necessarily to go to. Of course, it's great luck if you get to go to a place that you want to go to. But from that perspective, they get hardship allowances, housing covered. They get all these extra perks on top of already generally being pretty senior people. It's also natural, of course, given that you're being sent, for example, if you imagine Kazakhstan as your example, that they're not going to learn the language. And they're not being sent there to learn the language per se. They're being sent there to oversee local operations from a headquarters perspective. And from that perspective, they're going to be at a disadvantage to people who are like me, for example, who migrate to Japan for the purpose of living here and are actually competent at living here. So, I admit I've got a little bit of a chip off my shoulder somewhat at expats. They've got a good deal, especially the ones in Japan. The fact that the ones who come to Japan rank Japan like 19th. In fact, on the rankings of countries that they had, it was like the second to bottom. And what would be the worst? Work-life balance, 33rd, schooling, 24th, political stability would have to be good, 6th. But it came out... what was it? Yeah, out of 33, Japan came 32, beating out only Brazil. And I guess, it's true that Japan's... that's just weird to me. Even for people who don't intend to come to Japan, in a way, Japan's kind of such a popular tourist destination right now. But, for people who sort of come here, it's true in a sense that you're kind of trapped in a bubble. If you don't speak English, it's definitely improving, but certainly you're kind of stuck to the very few. In Singapore or Hong Kong, you get to live in the best neighborhoods, and you can go and do anything that you want. And, generally with English you can get by. In Japan, of course, you are stuck in the gilded cage of the very, very rich expat neighborhoods. Where if you've got corporate housing and you're a boss, you're going to live in Roppongi, Kamiyacho, Ebisu, those sort of, which are some of the nicest neighborhoods in Tokyo, where I would love to live as well, especially in a rent paid for apartment, because those apartments there cost like $10,000 a month. So you've got this, and again, there's only a handful of international schools. They're extremely expensive. Little Johnny's doing figure painting for $20,000 a year, and that's often covered in these packages as well. But at the same time, you're living, instead of in a 30 million person, megalopolis city, you're living in an English-speaking community in Tokyo of less than 30,000 people, and in an expat community connected among those English speakers are probably less than 10,000. And I've lived in smaller than 10,000 person towns, and if you've lived in a smaller than 10,000 person town, it's a little bit weird. And add on top of that the overwhelming investment banker, male, either young or middle-aged thing, and there's a lot of weirdness there. And this is where I'm quite happy to be kind of one foot in and one foot out. I've got one foot very well in Japan. I'm very well adjusted here relatively. I can hang out with expats and it can be fun, but in the end of the day, when I want to leave them behind and go to my suburban home, I can also do that as well. So it's kind of for these people, my theory on I tweeted that expats find the indigenous slave help in Tokyo very disappointing. Which is a little bit snarky and probably not entirely correct, given that Switzerland came out 1 and Canada came out 3, so I was probably looking at it with a certain bias. But yeah, no, I 33 out of 32, I don't know what expats are expecting from Tokyo, but there are much worse places to be an expat. I guess the other thing that makes Tokyo difficult as an expat is that the idea of the Douglas MacArthurs that get flown out to Japan to take over, this is what Rochelle and I make our entire series about. It doesn't work like that. here. Japanese generally are doing things themselves, and it can be very hard to exert influence and very hard to be successful here. So from that perspective as well, I suppose it can be difficult as an expat, but you're in Japan, how bad could it be? That said, I realise that I'm only one story in, and we are a long way behind time. Big updates on Hong Kong this week, of course. Carrie Lam announced the withdrawal of the extradition bill, which was the trigger of the original protests. And it was a silly thing to hold back for so long. Of course, now we had the leak. It seems like it must have been on purpose. The leak of her conversation with a friend, a private conversation where she apparently confessed that she really just wanted to resign and make all the concessions that she was being asked to make. But she was trapped by the Beijing government, and after that leak came out, she basically did go ahead and make the main concession. And it should have been in terms of the. If the bill was dead, as she said it was, it should have been a formality to withdraw it, and not withdrawing it, and all the aggro that it created. I mean, anyone could realize that was a stupid thing not to do, and that's why millions of people came out marching. Now, of course, as Andrea mentions, there are 4 other demands. Off the top, I'm probably not going to get them all right, but they basically want the designation of those protests as riots to be withdrawn. They want investigations into the police. They want I think they want to have a full, like at the moment, the legislature in Hong Kong, there's a certain number of appointed seats and a certain number of elected seats. They want all the seats to be elected, and they want Carrie Lam to resign. I don't know that you're going to get millions of people out necessarily for those remaining things. You're certainly going to have continued protests. I do think I'm mindful of, from a Hong Kong perspective as well, not having Beijing march in there with tanks, which it felt like last week they were pretty close to doing. So yes. Did I say well, again, remember in terms of me using the word aggro that I left New Zealand in 1998, Australia in early 1999, and for me time is frozen in those countries, so I still say Sheila. Well, actually, you know what, I left Australia, I grew up in Australia really until 1984, and then I left then, so I still say Sheila and grouse, and I'm all my slang is out of date. In New Zealand, I still say choice. So yes, I'm kind of stuck with my slang. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world anymore. But yes. So I don't know, with the protests continuing, in terms of the riot, I mean, there were. I mean, in terms of whether the police were faking, throwing Molotov cocktails as they got caught doing. And certainly the violence by the police that was filmed of them going in and just randomly beating people up on the subways, that was ridiculous. That should, no question, be investigated. But I think that Hong Kong has a really strong independent justice system. It still does, and it should be trusted a little bit. At least people should see how that goes. In terms of democracy, I still think that England could have made Hong Kong fully democratic the whole time that Hong Kong was a colony, and they had an appointed governor general, and they didn't really democratize Hong Kong properly until the very end. So I feel like Hong Kong is kind of screwed in the middle on all of this, but we'll see. I'm certainly hoping that they see an improved situation from this, and I think Carrie Lam did the right thing. So we'll see. Indeed, Agro's cartoon connection. I'll get back into the topics down here. This is kind of cool. This person has been taking photographs of Tokyo with no people for a long time, which is very hard to see, but there we go. In fact, you know what? That is the Shimoda building. I used to work in that building. I didn't realize that till just now, because of the construction around it. In fact, you know what? Not only did I used to work in that building, but I believe that red building behind it is another building I used to work in. So that's a pretty good photo there. But yes, Tokyo with no people. In fact, I'm not actually sure. There's 2 ways that you can take photos like this. You could get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and get lucky. Or you could just take a really long exposure, and eventually the people walking around will blur out, and you'll just be left with the buildings. It's kind of, given the long shadows, it looks like this person has shot them early in the morning. But yes, 1992, it looks like, yeah, they were just very lucky to get them sometimes. Oh, in fact, it says here, it's hard to do even very early in the mornings. Yeah, I suppose that you could do it early in the morning and take a long time lapse, but there we go. So that's pretty, and there are no cars in these photos either, so that's pretty cool. And by the way, spoontamago.com, if you're interested in sort of design and art and stuff like that, or that's Japan related, it's a great blog to follow. Highly recommended. More Ghosn drama. So Ghosn's court date looks like it's not going to be until next March, and he's still, in detention, and he's forbidden from seeing his wife, which, if he proves to be not guilty, that's kind of ridiculous. In the meantime, the person who called the cops on him and ousted him and has been running Nissan ever since, this guy Saikawa, it turns out that he gave himself a $450,000 performance bonus that didn't exist, but he invented it and then gave it to himself and then claimed the compensation, i.e. He found a way to give himself $450,000, which has been revealed as being through illegal and inappropriate means. And he said, okay, I'll just pay the money back. He is now, it looks like in the shareholder meeting, the proposal to reappoint him as CEO has been turned down because the Japanese companies that own shares in Nissan are against it. They don't feel confident in him. And Ghosn himself has released a statement that, this is more flagrant and more malicious. Akushisu was the term used in the Japanese release of Ghosn's statement, that what Saikawa has done is, or appears to have done, and that he's admitting to and is offering to pay the money back for, is actually far more direct and malicious than anything Ghosn has been accused of. Of course, him ending up in jail would probably require him needing to send himself to jail, because he's the guy who sent Ghosn to jail, reported to the police. But yes, indeed. Oh, Andrea Moboy, you're going out, so have a good night there. And yes, okay, well, have a good trip to Europe. I'm going to be out next week, so I guess you're going to, and in fact, depending on my timing when I get back, I'm not sure how I'll do the week after next either. So yes, have a good trip, and see you when you get back. So anyway, that's happened with Saikawa. So this hand is really kind of going down the crapper a little bit, and that's more drama. Here's a big topic, and this is I have sometimes baited and prodded Nippon.com over this online. I love Nippon.com. It's one of the best sources for detailed information about what's going on in Japan, current topics, societal issues. It focuses more on providing solid background information than news per se, although it will use timely news topics, but it will focus, rather than telling you what happened yesterday, it will focus on what this thing is all about. It's a fantastic site, you should all follow it. But when it comes to writing down people's names, they're just completely wrong. And let me explain this for a moment. So it is true that when you are speaking Japanese, there is Japanese, like most other Asian cultures actually, like Korea, China, whatever, you always say the name in Japanese is the surname first and the first name second. Kind of makes sense. The important thing comes first. And like the group that you're, the family that you're in comes first, and then which one you are comes second. It's the general thinking throughout Asia. And so if you're like Tanaka Taro or whatever, that would be first. Whoa, zombie. Simon Hiko, indeed, not hard to do it all, not hard to flip around. But this is in Japanese, this is the thing. When you're speaking Japanese, you'd say Abe Shinzo. In fact, you'd almost never say the first name. That's the other thing as well. Japanese are a very surname-oriented culture. That kind of makes it easier as well. The problem there being that when you meet Japanese, especially as a foreigner, there is this funny thing, because Japanese do reverse order. But they also, when they see a foreigner, they will typically, so you'll have Tanaka-san, Honda-san, Toyota-san, and, and Jerry-san. And Jerry might be Jerry Smith. But it'll be pretty rare. The Japanese always like, oh, it's a foreigner, I can call you, hey, BTC Chiba. People will assume that they can call you foreigners by their first names. Or they'll be totally confused as to which is the first name or the last name. And, for years, and when I first got here, this was always a thing. I always hated it when people would be introducing themselves by their surnames, surname, and then they'd introduce me first name, and I'd say, no, actually my surname is this. And then, yeah, but we can just call you first name, right? We can just call you Hiko. And I was kind of like, well, no, if we're all using surnames, I want to be treated the same. And there's always this weird thing, and the problem is then you go to the bank, and when I say that my name is such and such, they're like, yeah, but okay, you're a foreigner, so what do you mean? Do you mean this way or this way? And in a way, it's kind of anticipating that they don't expect foreigners will understand the Japanese name system, and they expect, everyone's going to be like Michael Bolton, everyone's going to be like Tom Cruise. They want foreigners, even in Japanese, they'll say the names in the order that they appear on the movie posters. And it's highly confusing, and it really it's kind of frustrating. I've learned to let go of it over time. But if you ask me, the way that it should be, and the way that avoids confusion is Japanese generally when they do speak in English, until now the convention in Japanese government and most print has been that when writing in English they would use the English language convention for saying names, which is last name, first name. And it's true that in China and Korea, those countries actually will use like you say, Kim Jong-un, for example. He's Kim is his surname, of course. It's Mr. Kim, but we all accept like President Moon Beijing, I think that's of South Korea, for example, as well, or Xi Jinping of China, the president of China, whatever his official title is. They publish and use the reverse of the surname first thing, and basically Kono Taro Kono, or Kono Taro, depending on how you want to call them, the Japanese foreign ministers decided, yeah, we should do what Korea and China do and make all foreign press with regards to Japanese government people refer in the Japanese name order. Let's not be colonized by Western thinking, and following the Western conventions for names in English. Let's have everybody respect the Japanese convention and say Japanese surname first, which is kind of fine. But this has problems for me, and the problems are that it seems kind of simple. So okay, for Japanese people, say for surname first name, and for foreign people, say first name last name in English. Again, all that you're really doing is exporting the confusion that happens in Japanese by fruitlessly trying to distinguish the names in the first place. And you can see the issues that are going to come here. Hey, Ty, good to see you, man. For example, okay, Japanese person, Tanaka Taro, what about a Nikkei? What about an American person who is of Japanese ancestry? They don't necessarily use kanji, so it might be Tanaka Taro all in katakana. But what if they're like a Kikoku Shijo that was born in Japan, but was like Osaka Naomi, for example, who was born in Japan, moved to America when she was 3, and culturally, is American, but is a Japanese citizen by birth and has a Japanese family register. Does she still get to be Osaka Naomi, or is she Naomi Osaka? The result in the Japanese media, she is treated as Osaka Naomi, but that's partly because she's representing Japan. But what about, again, you got all these permutations of people who are, what about foreigners what about people who are born in Japan to both foreign parents, so they're not Japanese citizens, but they've grown up entirely in Japan? And how are you supposed to know? What about half Japanese? What about half Japanese that are raised in Japan and half Japanese that are raised outside of Japan? And what about half Japanese that are 50-50? Which order do you put the names? To me, you're just like creating a minefield of upset and offense and identity issues, which are entirely unnecessary. The language already has a convention. Japanese has a convention that you say surname, first name. English has a convention that you say first name, last name. I think you should just stick with the rules of the language and not go imposing your culture and expecting that every person from Idaho is going to understand that when they're speaking English in Japan and they're saying first name, last name, that they're going to be wrong in English. I mean, that's just weird. Christ Jesus, indeed. So this is why I disagree with this. Although apparently this has been the editorial style for writing names on Nippon.com for ages, and I'm actually curious. What do they do for these grey zone people? And, I believe the people at Nippon.com should have reasonable familiarity with grey zone people, right? Like with Japanese who have grown up outside of Japan, or born outside of Japan to Japanese parents, or all the permutations, and how big of a manual do they have for applying this policy? Do they say Trump Donald? I mean, seriously. So to me, the problem is you get into all the problems that you get when you try to, you're associating cultural identity, citizenship. What is the test? And how do you know? It's just ridiculous. I think Perk, that would be Mr. Jesus' son, correctly. Quinn Rankin, you want to be called by your middle name. Well, that's another thing that I've had a problem. When I first came to Japan, no form, including bank account forms, had a middle name parameter, field. So of course I just registered for everything like I don't have a middle name. I actually got more used to not using my middle name. It doesn't really serve a purpose in Japan. Japanese don't have middle names. So I just got used to not doing it. But then, like last year, my bank told me that my name on my bank account has to match my passport, and now I can use my middle name. So they need me to change my information to include my middle name, which I did. But the moment that I did that, every automatic payment that my bank had set up broke. Everything stopped working. And when I went to send the updated payment forms with my middle name included, the bank would always reject it the first time. They still do it. I still can't get it right. So again, you can use middle names, but it's totally confusing. There is a nice opportunity when you come to Japan that you can decide how you want to be referred to, although again, you'll find people will often choose regardless of what you want. So that's a thing that is happening. Yes, Tomei Samurai, Japan uniquely does first name then last name. I'm probably jumping in, I looked at that at the wrong part. So, yes indeed, I'll probably keep looking down, although remember as well, what up indeed Tai Nakamura, and remember as well, if you want to direct a question to me, say at Makiko Simon and I will notice it. But yes, well, that's right, I probably got distracted by the comments at the wrong time there. Yes, this is kind of cool. Apparently, and who is doing this? I saw this is from like a robot web. You have all these technology challenges, like the sending, a moon probe and stuff like that. There's currently an engineering challenge in Japan for the Gundam Global Challenge to build a properly independently moving 18 meter, that's 3 meters per floor, so that's a 6-story high Gundam robot that actually works by 2020, by summer of 2020. When they say this, I don't know if there's a cash prize for achieving it first, but it's one of these goals that various teams are trying to be able to achieve. And what people are looking for is able to balance and walk around. This is kind of cool. So by this time next year, there are going to be a couple of teams competing to make a working 18-meter, 6-story tall Gundam robot that actually walks around. And they sort of got all the specs in this competition, and that would be super cool if they do it. And yes, I'm going to read Tomei Samurai's comment there in the long version. So I feel like you could make both the same rant in a world where the last name first is the norm, and Japan uniquely does. Oh, of course, that's right. So this is my point about your point, Tomei Samurai, is that I think bringing in, I think it's better to treat naming conventions as a language-oriented convention. Especially given that with Japanese, you've got Japanese culture embedded in the language there already. I don't think expecting that the 10 million cultures in the world are known and accounted for in a single language is a good way to work. I think it's good to respect the culture and the conventions of that culture in the language that belongs to that culture. A language is a key part of defining culture, but I don't think it's helpful to be, trying to import. I mean, geez, if you're going to swap around name order in English to respect Japanese people, why not swap around word order? Why not say subject, object, verb? Why not say I to the zoo go? Why put your verbs in the middle of the sentence like we do in English? Why hold them back to the end? Keep people in suspense. That's being culturally more sensitive. It's just as kind of ridiculous. If you ask me, Japanese expect to hear the surname first. In English, you expect to hear the first name first. Just in the same way, in Japanese, you don't expect the verb until the end. You can be overwhelmed with shock. Maybe we should save them that. We should all talk like Yoda. just for cultural sensitivity. That's my view on that. I think it's silly. But the Japanese government is demanding that foreign journalists now refer to Japanese politicians in the surname first. So there we go. This is super cool anyway, the Gundam Challenge, and I hope someone gets it. The Hotel Okura, for a long time, since like the 1960s, it was like the only classy international hotel in Tokyo. It's right beside the American Embassy. So it's pretty much where, for a time, particularly through the end of the occupation, it was always the swankiest, the flashiest hotel. My dad stayed there once around 2000, and I've been there, and it's still kind of flash in a 1960s kind of a way, which a lot of people appreciate. That aesthetic is now very, very rare, and they appreciated that the hotel sort of preserved that kind of there was this idea it had this kind of value as a cultural asset just for the way it preserved the swinging 60s in a sophisticated way. But for me, along with being a hotel that looked like it was fashionable in the 60s, it had that kind of musty smell to it. It was overpriced, the rooms were small. The location is always great, but they realized that with new hotels going up in central Marunouchi, like the Shangri-La, like the Oriental, that are genuine 5-6 star hotels. The Okura's sort of domination of that luxury international hotel market thing, which they were really the only player in Tokyo for like 50 years, and they got a free run at it. They weren't measuring up anymore, so they decided to knock the whole thing down and rebuild it, which they probably had to do just for earthquake standards anyway if it was built in the 60s. They have rebuilt, and the room prices have come up to the standards of Oriental and Shangri-La. I'm not really in a rush to go there. It is a very flash hotel. I'd be curious to go have lunch there one day and check it out a little bit. I was never overawed by the Okura, and frankly myself, I know there are a lot of people being very sentimental about knocking the Okura down and replacing it. I'm a modernist. I think it's always better to be doing something cooler and newer. I'm from New Zealand and Australia. I'm from places that are new, that people go to build new things. I come to Tokyo because Tokyo feels like it's ahead of everywhere else, and it's constantly being renewed. In fact, everywhere in Tokyo is being renewed. So if I want to go to a 1960s, there are still places in Japan, like resorts you go to, that have a 1960s feel, and it's often not good. I want to go somewhere new, which granted makes it a little bit less special and a little bit like the other flash new places. But good on the Okura for doing it, if you ask me, and I'm curious to check it out. So yes, a bit of a story here from Mokoto Rich, who is actually, in fact, it's not Mokoto Rich, it's Motoko Rich. Did the Independent misspell her name? I'm sure they must have fixed it on the, that would be the R's. Hang on a second, I'm sure that have I been saying her name wrong for years? No, it's definitely because Mokoto is like Makoto is like a dude's name, and I know who this person is, and this has to be Motoko Rich. Does she not know that they still have her name up there with a spelling mistake? That's horrible. So there you go. This is exoticist coverage of Japan. By people who don't know what they're talking about. Of course, Motoko Rich knows what she's talking about. She writes for the New York Times covering Japan. Of course, she's Japanese. However, she's written a feature on the trend in Japan, which is not just a trend in Japan. This is a trend everywhere in the developed world. Look at birth rates, look at marriage rates, look at divorce rates, look at living together and not giving a shit about being married rates. People are choosing not to be married, increasingly. Although I would certainly say as well, as I've said many times on this show, that I believe that the equation in Tokyo is the freedom and fun and the quality of life you have in Tokyo, particularly in Tokyo, more so than the rest of Japan, as an independent single person that you have, as opposed to being someone attached to somebody, as opposed to, on top of that, having kids to look after in Tokyo. Your quality of life difference. Tokyo's got everything. You can pursue any job, you can pursue any hobby. It's got unlimited potential for self-realization. The moment you have to split your time between self-realization and helping someone else with their day-to-day, and the moment that you split it again with having a kid in a city that's not really designed for kids, and pretty much having to, I mean, this is life, of course, but you talk about a theme park of fun for if you are not married or attached, where there's literally unlimited potential. That's why people come to Tokyo. And you consider the Japanese cultural expectation of women doing all the work and taking, sacrificing everything, looking after the kids and so on. Yeah, there is certainly a logical trend that reinforces the low birth rate and the low marriage rate of Japanese women rejecting marriage. It's not quite as simple as, it's funny, it looks like that she is talking about a kind of a personal experience of meeting friends who are of a certain age, i.e. in their 30s, and who have decided that they're not going to have foregoing the old cultural expectation of marrying by 25, and certainly people are now getting into their mid-30s, even their late 30s, before they suddenly decide that they want kids nowadays. But yes, certainly a quarter of women now have never been married who are above 35, and that number is increasing. There is another flip side to this trend as well. That along with this trend of people who are with increasing employment opportunities and chances for women to have proper careers in Tokyo, and people not wanting to give that up, and sticking to that, there are people I've been familiar with as well who get to their late 30s when they're just getting like their final years of being able to safely have kids without assistance, and then they're like, oh, you know what, maybe I should have had kids after all, and and then they regret as well. So it's kind of complicated stuff, and there's a lot of people trying to get help to have kids at 40 years and above now. And of course it's possible to do, but it generally requires assistance. But yeah, this is something about Japan that you can say, it's the thing, Tokyo is too awesome to be in, and this is one of the side effects of the low birth rate, is one of the side effects of it. That's my interpretation of it. Korea has a lower birth rate than Japan, as does Italy and Sweden and other countries. Germany, I think, have incredibly low birth rates as well. Japan just had a really, really big population. Back in the 50s and 60s, it was still normal in Japan to have like 8-9 kids. Part of that's the legacy that in the 19th century, Japan, you had 8-9 kids, like in the UK in the 18th century, you'd expect 3 or 4 of them to die. You don't expect 3 or 4 kids to make it to full adulthood, so people would have 10 kids. Japan had a similar thing during the Meiji Restoration when science came into Japan and medical care went up. All of a sudden, people who were used to having 10 kids, all those kids were surviving to adulthood, and then Japan had this huge population explosion, which is partly what led to World War II. All of a sudden the kids weren't dying anymore, and there wasn't enough land or resources to go around, so they went and invaded Asia. And this continued after World War II. So what makes it unique is not that Japan has a especially low birth rate. It does have a low birth rate, but it's similar to the low birth rate in other countries. But what's really special about Japan is that even in comparison to Korea, for example, where Korea has a lower birth rate than Japan, but Korea was in a civil war during the 50s and 60s. Japan was going through the economic miracle. So there were lots and lots of people born in the 50s and 60s. So the problem is the disparity of the enormous number of elderly people in Japan, and the contrasting extremely low birth rate is the challenge here. But yes, again, people realize the sacrifice if they get married and they're choosing not to make it, and fair enough. Although of course, it's an interesting choice, and it's not unique to Japan that this is happening. But yes, it's that double-edged sword of things that I think make Japan kind of awesome. So that is there. This is a thing that I found yesterday, and I saw this Japanese twerk, Yayoi Daimon, who I've never heard of before, drops new music video. It leaves viewers gasping for more, with a picture of someone's bum and twerk, twerk, twerk as the subtitles, the captions on the screen. It is in Japanese, but it's in a Kansai accent. And if you don't speak Japanese, I can't really explain to you how Kansai accent kind of changes the vibe. The only way I can put it is, I like repetitive, kind of hip-hop, R&B type music, electronic music. I like simple stuff. I like bums. a Japanese video like with a repetitive, sort of bass line saying twerk, twerk, twerk. I should like this, and I was expecting to like it. And in the photos she seems good looking, so I was kind of like, this should be fine. But you know what? I looked at it, I watched it, and I was kind of like, yeah, I don't like this. And part of it's, I get it, she's trying to be like, owning it and whatever, but it just doesn't like the accent kind of grates. It just doesn't work. You could do it better in Japanese, but yeah, essentially they're trying to do the equivalent of the sorts of videos that have been done all over the place in R&B in America and done well. Kind of a Japanese version of My Milkshake, I suppose, or Miley Cyrus, but it just doesn't quite work for me. But apparently there are lots of people who probably don't quite understand exactly what she's saying without the captions, who find it good, and good for them. I don't know, it's interesting. I'm guessing a lot of you guys might enjoy it. Maybe it's just me turning into a grumpy old man. I mean, I should enjoy something that says Kitsu Fure 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 like it says, but it's just not. I don't know. I was like, what's wrong with me that I'm not enjoying this? A for effort, but apparently this person, she lives in Los Angeles, although has a Japanese team that she makes these videos with. And the visuals, the concept, everything kind of works. It's dance, dance, vocal unit, rhythmic, everything kind of works, but it just doesn't, I don't know, doesn't work for me. You should check it out, however. Yayoi Diamond's Japanese twerk. There's that. I have been sticking to my KT diet, but yes, there's just some stuff which is just too good to miss. Of course, I think I mentioned last week about Hanbakuto, how while Korea was preparing outrage and poking fun at Japan and farting in Japan's general direction with military exercises around Dokdo in case the Japanese ever tried to militarily attack Korea to take its island back. And while this was happening, North Korea just walked into, an island that South Korea had its back turned and just took over a South Korean island and put a flag and a military base on it. So while that goes on, there is a positive side to all the negativity. You can get airfares apparently from Japan to South Korea right now for $9. You've got all of these empty flights going back and forth. And right now the airlines are trying to, change their schedules and cancel these empty flights ostensibly because of the boycott of Koreans wanting to boycott Japan, or at least be seen to be boycotting Japan, not being seen coming over here. The result is you can go to Seoul for $9. I mean, hell, you can barely make it to Hachioji for $9. So it's only like in fact, you can't even watch a whole movie on the flight. It's like it's like an 80 minutes in the air flight. It's a close flight. And Seoul is pretty awesome, actually. When I first went to Seoul in 1999 or 2000, maybe it was, as a backpacker, it felt like the whole place was kind of under construction. It felt more more removed from Japan than I expected it to be. Recent years, I've done a few trips to Seoul, and I've found each time it's actually like, particularly I was in Gangnam, Gangnam style Gangnam, the posh part of Seoul, but it felt like Omotesando. I mean, it felt like it used to be like you'd see buildings that had these cool facades, and you go in and it's like it's all under construction or half finished. Big flash roads where the footpaths were like dirt in the middle of Seoul. That's what it was like in the early 2000s. Now all the construction is done. It actually looks, it's nice. The food is great. The coffee culture is great. The streets are clean. I highly recommend going and checking out Korea, especially if it's $9. I mean, holy crap! You wouldn't get to like Nikko or Shizuoka for that, right? You get probably to like a little bit beyond Yokohama maybe for $9. And it would take 1.5 hours on the train to get from here to Shizuoka, here to Nikko, from central Tokyo. From Haneda, you get to Korea in that time, and yeah, go and check it out, seriously. And I was kind of joking that with bad relations causing airfares to be $9 to get to Seoul, I would be like, hey Japan, you hear what Korea's been saying about your mama. I mean, I realize this is a small upside from an overall tragic and terrible situation, but the other thing about the overall terrible situation is, while people have been debating about whether America should like intervene and fix this problem and tell them both to get along, anyone who thinks that that's possible has no idea what they're getting into or what they're talking about or what this is about. And the issues between Japan and Korea are not fixable fundamentally. I mean, we can talk on the one-off, the latest outrage, the latest thing, and one-off you could say, well, on those export things, you should have a 10-point plan for improving export controls, and this will never need to happen again. But that's just ignoring the 800 years of, weekly bullshit back and forth, just getting to a particularly bad place. I've given all my opinions on that relationship before. I generally see things from a biased Japanese perspective because I'm in Japan, but from where I'm sitting, it's in the end of the day, regardless of whose fault it is, it's up to both countries to have the willpower to improve things, and neither does. Generally, it's Japan that apologizes. Japan's apologized, paid money, formal apologies, compensation, and the other side doesn't want to be apologized to. That's the way that it comes across when they shut down the fund that was giving personal apologies from Shinzo Abe and money to the comfort women. When Korea got 6 times its annual GDP or its annual budget, government budget, as compensation to settle all World War II related claims in 1965. Japan's made an honest effort, but in the end of the day, hey, Korea wants to be pissed off. They're entitled to be pissed off forever, and that's just the way that it is. It's not fixable. But we can enjoy cheap airfares, and Korea's awesome, and Korea and Japan should be friends. Everyone should be taking $9 airfares to Seoul and going over there and making friends and being awesome. So that's a good thing. That's me wearing the jersey. Tried it on. I like it. I think it's a cool jersey. I'm going to get autographs all over it in a few days' time. This is just an article about how once the most popular Tarento, Japanese sort of unionized TV entertainer, Samba has recently become one of the most disliked according to polls, and people are at a loss for it. I'll tell you, when I first started watching Japanese TV around 1995 on video cassettes in New Zealand, Samba had these great talk shows and variety shows that he hosted. He's one of the most respected hosts in Japan. And when I came to Japan in 1999, he still was that. And when I continued watching TV as a single person through, the mid-2000s, he was on like half the TV shows. And today, I don't watch TV anymore, but when I turn it on, I still see his face every time I turn it on, i.e., and not only that, but everyone else, the comedians, even the people who were young when I came here in the 90s, it's also the same people, and they're the same age as me. When I was a dumbass 23-year-old just arrived in Japan, so were all these comedians, and they're still dominating TV. I get the impression that hardly anyone new has actually come into Japanese TV since I got here in 1999. And some people like Samba have basically dominated. They've had a chokehold on presentation of popular TV talk shows for like 30 years. And granted, you've got that baby boom generation of people that like him and that are going to watch him until they're 90 years old. But basically, TV doesn't cater for younger generations, and the way that the kind of union system, the kind of the Tarento system that basically TV channels agree to give block time to people from each agency that they put forward, and they'll bank and all the advertising, all the sponsorships will be linked to these Tarento. It just means that there's been no chance for anyone young to break into TV, to become a new personality or get a new talk show or anything like that. 20, 30 years. And that's why people don't watch TV anymore, because you look at it, it's just the same old people. All the game shows in Japan, they don't invite, like Family Feud would be teams of unionized Tarento who are already getting paid lots of money. But the deal with the talent agencies is that TV channels will not show normal people. They'll only show unionized Tarento people on TV shows and only let them win prize money. It's just a way to do kickbacks and bonuses to Tarento having the game shows. It's just the same stuff over and over and over, and it's not that Summer's not a seemingly good guy who actually is quite funny and actually does great talk shows and is entertaining to watch. It's just been the same old shit for so long, and this is why no one, people, TV's like looking at terebi banare, separation from TV by young people as a crisis. But they gotta get new blood. That's the simple problem. It's worked as a racket for too long, and it's sort of coming back that way. Marco 19914, could I become a Tarento, a terebi Tarento? When I first got to Japan, there were a few shows that sort of featured. I think there still are. If you're a foreigner, there's always a chance. Foreigners are expected to be coming in and out. There are always new Tarento coming through. And there's a few Tarento Jimmy Show where if you're a foreigner and you want to be on TV, seriously, you just walk up, register at a Jimmy Show, and you can probably get on, a panel or a TV audience or something like that. It's not hard to do as a foreigner. And when I first got to Japan, there was a show called Kore ga Hendai o Nihonjin, which is a show where basically there's a huge audience of foreigners just saying crazy, outrageous things about Japan, like, oh, why do Japanese use chopsticks? It's outrageous, you should all use forks. And everyone acts outraged or supportive or whatever. And there were a couple of particularly outspoken, quasi-famous people from that show. And I remember I met one or two of them out in the wild, and I said, oh, I love you on that TV show, that'd be awesome. And they said, hey, if you want to be on it, I'll get you on it. And I had a chance to actually be on that show, and I considered, oh, that would be really fun. I could be a Tarento. And, I've had opportunities with introductions to become Tarento, like back in my early years. And I thought about it and I didn't do it. But I like this. This is in my own time, on my own terms. And it's with you guys. The idea of going on a TV show and like reading scripts on sort of fake shows and stuff like that. And I don't know. No, but certainly I don't think it's... It certainly is much easier to become a Tarento if you're a foreigner than if you're a Japanese. So I could be, but I'm not. And I'm not really. If I'm being honest, I might have been interested in it when I first got here. Remembering that internet didn't really. YouTube didn't exist when I first got here. But now I'm quite happy to not be. And finally, for the Typhoon, which, now I mentioned I can hear the wind outside a little bit more now. Remember, pay attention to the maps. It is going to be, you can see the times, it's going to be hitting Shizuoka and Oshima around actually 6 p.m. tonight. It's going to make landfall, actually latest one is at midnight. It's going to be making landfall in Kanagawa. It'll be passing directly over Tokyo at about 6 a.m. or just between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. And it will be heading out towards Tohoku, obviously by midday tomorrow, so it's going to pass over very quickly. People are warning record rains, record winds. There's already evacuation notices for Kanagawa and Shizuoka, which are going to hit the brunt of this very powerful typhoon when it makes landfall. I do like the fact that Japanese use numbers. For their typhoons. We always used to call them like women's names when I was a kid, like for typhoons and hurricanes and so on. And apart from the fact it's kind of misogynist, and the idea that it's like women coming in and destroying everything or whatever, and that now that we move on to more exotic names that you can't really tell. Just once I want to see a typhoon, Trump, or something like that. Right now, numbers just make sense. This is the 15th typhoon of 2019. How hard is that? Also, although the official forecast says that this typhoon will not actually be hitting Alabama, I did adjust this map just to show the reality. I got a digital Sharpie and I kind of just extended it on the side there where Fukui is, just to show how the typhoon will also be making landfall in Alabama, and people in Alabama watching should please be careful as well. But for the most part, it will be directed on Tokyo and the prefectures around it. And yes, I understand, Tomei Samurai, that right now you're getting a Typhoon Trump every day, but that's exactly the point, right? So I think numbers make sense. Be safe, everybody, if you're in Japan. This will all be over early tomorrow morning. The trains are currently going to be stopped before it comes in, and they're going to stay stopped probably until about 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning tomorrow. So my commute's going to get affected. I am going to go into work once the trains run, but what can you do? So stay safe, and that's all the topics for tonight. I was going to talk a little bit about Jordan Peterson. Man, although, you know what? No, I'm quite glad I don't have to do that. I've erased him from my feed. Although I'd be happy to get into it if someone ever wanted to talk about that. I was also going to talk about how I just saw an awesome YouTube video yesterday by a member of the Wu-Tang Clan talking about the China, particularly Hong Kong and Taiwan kung fu movie influences on their albums, specifically identifying the parts that they took out and why. And it was cool. I learned all about Wu-Tang Clan songs, and I learned about like kung fu cinema at the same time. I thought it was super cool. It was one of the best videos I've seen for ages. I saw Brian McNeil sharing it on Facebook today. I made a slightly deliberately provocative statement of see, appropriation can be a good thing. I can accept it's not always a good thing, but I can see how surely you can accept that's awesome cross-pollination of hip-hop culture and kung fu movie culture. It's a great video and I highly recommend looking at it. But that's it, we are 10 minutes over. So as usual, I did not keep it under the 1 hour, but yes, it's awesome sharing all of this stuff with you. Remember, Quentin Rankin, I'm kind of a fan, but I want to temper it because there's an interesting discussion to be had around Peterson. I found it thought-provoking. I do enjoy his debating style. I think the videos were set up a little bit. I don't like watching, Peterson destroys feminists, over and over and over, which isn't necessarily the case every time. It doesn't mean he's absolutely right either, although I think he has interesting points, which he puts in a really good way. So yes, I could get into that one, but I won't do that tonight. And yes, you imagine a 30-minute segment could be, Believe in Yourself believes that a 30-minute segment could be easily assembled for DJ Simon and Tokyo Digital Crew, not a band per se, but creators of music. You'll run this one by The Maker. I'm not sure exactly where that's from, but yes, happy to do that. I'm going to be in Seattle next week. I'm thinking about taking the keyboard with me. In the hotel room, it might be an opportunity. I could do some Marc Riviere sort of hotel mixes. That might be actually quite kind of fun to do. And in any case, it's an opportunity for me to learn the keyboard a little bit in an environment where I can do that safely, although it's going to be crazy with work. I'll probably be on Facebook, Twitter, asking for Seattle tips. I'm going to have 1 or 2 days. The first day where I'm adjusting, I'm going to have to myself. And if there's anyone in Seattle, I did a wee meetup with people in the Seattle area 2 years ago, and I might do that again this time. I'm going to be going north to south, so in terms of sightseeing. So I'm actually looking forward to that. So if any of you have any tips or things like that are fun to do for a day to stop me collapsing and make sure I stay awake on that first day in Seattle, I would love your tips. If you're in or around Seattle, would love to say hello on Sunday the 16th when I arrive. And otherwise, BTC Chiba, thoughts on crypto and Bitcoin in Japan in the next episode. I don't have a lot of knowledge to give you, BTC. Konbanwa Tomo L. Sorry, we're just finishing up the show now. You know what? I don't have a lot to say on the subject. I'm not very knowledgeable about it, to be honest, but I'd be happy to actually engage in a discussion or for you to give me information to go over and talk about later on. So, yes, indeed. Believe in yourself, I'd appreciate it. So send me what you have, I'd be interested. But and that's right, this is Robert, right? Yeah, so in any case, I've got to get myself back on the wagon a little bit with making music. But yes, I'm going to wrap it up there tonight. So thank you all for joining. Remember, I am normally here at 10:40 p.m. every Sunday, but I won't be next Sunday. I will be on Twitter and Facebook as I always am, under the same moniker, if you call Simon. So reach out and connect, and I hope to see some of you in Seattle. And probably post some updates, and I'll probably see you a week after next. So everybody have a good week, 2 weeks in fact, and keep cool till after school. Kai kite ano. Boom. Peace. Thank you. Remember to like if you liked, by the way. I always appreciate when people hit the like button. Have a good week, everybody. See you.